In 2015, Preservation Massachusetts celebrated our 30th anniversary. 30 years of preservation leadership, program, growth, and change. A lot can happen in 3 decades. And this year especially, we were offered an opportunity to reflect on our past accomplishments and challenges. But we also visualized ourselves evolving and growing as the field of historic preservation moves toward the future. This past year showed us that we have a lot to be proud of, and that there is always more to do. As an organization, we could not do what we do each and every day without the constant support of every individual person who shares our vision of preservation, community investment, heritage, neighborhoods, memories, and the collective culture of our shared Commonwealth. We rang in our 30th anniversary year with the fantastic news that our Eastern Massachusetts Circuit Rider would be returning. The generosity of the Keene Charitable Foundation allowed Preservation Massachusetts to restaff an important part of our preservation team and bring our Circuit Rider program back up to full capacity. Since 2008, our Preservation Circuit Riders have been an on-the-ground, in-the-field source of information, mentoring, resources, coaching, and network connections for people, organizations, and communities working with preservation challenges or issues. Though they are not a consultant nor a funding source, the Circuit Riders embody the intrinsically personal connection that preservation has on people. The program has done tremendous things for Preservation Massachusetts' advocacy efforts, our ability to be a true statewide, and strengthening the preservation community in our Commonwealth. You'll hear more about the great work of our dynamic duo of Stacia Caplanson and Jeff Gonyeau later on. In addition to great on-the-ground field staff, Preservation Massachusetts also made a huge step with another resource and program in 2015. In March, we closed our first pre-development loan with Develop Springfield for their restoration and adaptive reuse of the historic gun block building in Springfield. This project is critical to larger-scale master planning efforts along the State Street corridor and represents an important gateway into the city. Though it is a daunting and challenging project, Jay Minkara and his team are well deserving of this support, and we are proud to be an active contributor to this project. Is there a project in your community that is looking for critical pre-development funds? Our loan program is accepting applications on a rolling basis, and an application can be accessed easily from our website. We have funds to lend and look forward to supporting more great projects across Massachusetts. In May, Preservation Massachusetts concluded our 3-year thematic awards program, Producing Preservation, by awarding 30 fantastic historic rehabilitation projects from across the state. The Tsongas Awards dinner, held at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, surpassed previous years, with 500 attendees gathered to honor the projects and celebrate the impact that preservation has on our communities, economy, neighborhoods, quality of life, and more. Special guest speaker Secretary Jay Ash voiced the administration's dedication to strengthening our state's economy that was well exemplified by the honored projects. We were also extremely honored to have Mrs. Angela Menino present the first ever Mayor Thomas M. Menino Legacy Award, which is given to catalytic and transformative projects that create and embrace community partnerships. The inaugural recipient was the Bruce C. Bowling Building, which restored Dudley Square's Ferdinand Building and now serves as home to the Boston School Department. As always, our Tsongas Awards dinner is a highlight of our year and the premier preservation event in the Commonwealth. This year, we are excited to announce that our Tsongas Awards will focus on honoring the tremendous accomplishments of women in preservation. Women have been at the forefront of our preservation community since the very beginning. Because of their hard work, dedication, and unflagging leadership, we stand at a watershed moment for the movement, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the National Historic Preservation Act that was passed in 1966. This year, we honor those who have brought us to where we are now and those who will continue to advance that legacy into the future. Do you know an incredible woman in preservation? Nomination forms are now available on our website, and mark your calendars for the Tsongas Awards dinner on May 4th. Part of the legacy of Preservation Massachusetts is education and bringing people together to learn from each other and strengthen our network. The first statewide preservation conference in Massachusetts took place in 1986 and was run by Preservation Massachusetts, then known as Historic Massachusetts Incorporated. We returned to that legacy this past year with the 2015 Massachusetts Historic Preservation Conference. Held in Worcester on August 14th, over 300 attendees gathered for a fantastic day of informative sessions, engaging discussions, fantastic tours, and the opportunity to be amongst friends and colleagues for a great day. We could not have had such a successful conference without the support of our partners, our board of directors, our local hosts, Preservation Worcester, and the Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, and all of our sponsors, speakers, and volunteers. The conference will be held every other year, and we look forward to seeing you all in the fall of 2017 at an exciting location to be announced very soon. 2015 was a year of great accomplishment and reflection for Preservation Massachusetts. It was also one of great change. After 30 years in downtown Boston, we bid farewell to Old City Hall and took up residence just a stone's throw from where the Commonwealth began nearly 400 years ago. Our move to our new home in the Landmark Building on Main Street Extension in Plymouth took place in September, and we are excited to be in this former theater, built in 1915 as the Ferdinand Moaning, or Old Colony Theater, in the heart of downtown Plymouth. And from that heart, we will strive and work even harder to carry out our mission and work in all 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, as only befitting a true statewide organization. It may not appear large, but our state is, and full of historic resources, landscapes, neighborhoods, and memories of the past. Each community is unique, and what resonates about preservation changes from town to town. So we ask you to think about, what does preservation mean to you? Is it about preserving an important landmark? Ensuring the character of a place is retained? Is it about planning for the future while incorporating the legacy of the past? We have launched a new initiative this year to have people share what preservation truly means to them, and sharing their stories to show just how diverse and impactful the preservation movement really is. Now that the boxes are finally unpacked and the dust has settled, we are ready and excited for the next chapter in Preservation Massachusetts history. What we do is really a testament to the great support we receive from each and every one of you, every member, partner, board member, colleague, and friend. The support is not just about membership dollars. The support comes from a shared vision and belief in preservation and how it makes Massachusetts special and a place people want to call home. We are excited for our years ahead, and thank you for attending our annual meeting with us. Preservation team and bring our circuit rider program back up to full capacity. Since 2008, our preservation circuit riders have been
some of the diversity of who we serve, the issues they face, and illustrated by examples of some of my work from this year. One of the groups that we serve are churches of various denominations, and some of the issues that they face are deferred maintenance, declining congregations, the need to find new sources of revenue and or new uses for their buildings. Within the last year, I've visited out in South Hadley, the First Church, to talk with them about stained glass window repairs, repointing bricks, and how to find funding. I've also visited with St. John's Episcopal Church in Sutton, a congregation that is struggling to, and they're at this point participating in a program recasting assets that's organized by the Episcopal Church. It's a program to help congregations take stock of what they have and brainstorm new ways to generate revenue. We also visited the Stone Church in Gilbertville. A grassroots friends group is working to care for and explore new uses for this important community landmark. I also work with municipalities or get questions from municipalities, and sometimes their issues are things related to new uses for municipally owned buildings that oftentimes are underutilized or are even vacant. Within the past year, I've had contact with folks in Petersham looking at the Nishwauk Inn, which was listed back in 2002, 2003 on the most endangered list. The town at this point is working to hire a consultant to help advise them on potential adaptive reuses for a late 19th century inn that also has a mid-20th century addition. Another municipality that I've worked with is in Whately, with the old town hall. The Historical Commission is really concerned about how to reuse the space that was a town hall and is now vacant. They'd like to create space for a community center, and they'd also like some space for the Historical Society. I was also contacted by folks in Broomfield, the town hall and their town hall annex. They need to assess their buildings and come up with a master plan that addresses community needs. Other folks in Maynard, our school reuse committee, contacted me, and in Great Barrington also dealing with issues related to a vacant early 20th century building. Some of the other folks that contact me are community activists or community advocates, oftentimes trying to save a building from demolition or find a new use. An advocate in Hopkinton contacted me about the Toll House, and the folks in Southborough have been working with the Friends of the Burnett Garfield House to explore options to preserve that house and find new uses. Local historical commissions, community preservation commissions, and historical societies. A visit out to Upton to visit with the Historical Commission chair to look at the Stoddard Aldrich store. It's a 19th century building that's facing demolition for a parking lot. In Sturbridge, a newly formed historical commission is looking at the potential demolition of a fairgrounds exhibition hall to make way for a large chain drugstore. In Leverett, Great Barrington, Hatfield, Shutesbury, and Granville are only some of the communities who contacted, and with questions about using CPA funds. I think some of the most rewarding parts of my job are connecting people working on similar projects. The folks in Maynard and Great Barrington are a great case in point. Earlier in the year, I'd been in Maynard to meet with the school reuse committee that the town had formed and to learn about what they were doing. Later in the year, Great Barrington had hired a consultant who contacted me about a similar type of building, and I was able to connect folks on different parts of the state. And the Maynard School Reuse Committee chair was very happy to share their experience with Great Barrington. Part of my job that I also find really rewarding is to provide support and resources. We have a wonderful funding list put together by my predecessor. The Preservation Directory is a great resource, and other documents like a Town Hall Adaptive Reuse document. I also serve on the steering committee of the Western Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition, and through that organization we meet quarterly to provide continuing education, hear about projects in local towns, connect. It helps me to connect faces and names of people working in preservation in Western Mass. In October at our meeting in Springfield, we had over 60 people who attended. And our next meeting will be in the end of February in Greenfield. And I encourage any of you who are interested, reach out to me. I'd be happy to put you on our mailing list. You don't have to be in Western Mass. We do welcome folks from outside of the area. Another thing I really enjoy is learning about model projects. In West Springfield, they used CPA funds to hire a preservation consultant to oversee work on a Carnegie library that was part of a larger expansion project. Hearing about that project, I've been able to reference that project and share that information with other CPA communities and point to it as a best model project. It's also great to hear about next steps. A year ago, the Leverett, a group in Leverett that is in an old box factory had contacted me. The space has currently been used as a gallery and artist studios, And the initial contact with them was regarding CPA-funded window replacement. In conversations with them, it became really apparent that they really needed to take a step back to look at the project holistically and to come up with funding for preservation plan. They've received MHC funding and contacted me to let me know that, and also asked for names of preservation architects who could work with them. I think that what really I love about the job is that it has the potential to make a positive impact in revitalizing communities and also contributes to creating and encouraging a culture of preservation across the Commonwealth. I'd be happy to talk with you more about the work, and I encourage you to reach out and let me know about model projects in your communities. Connecting people with resources is what we do. And thank you.
Thank you so much for attending the annual meeting of Preservation Mass and for letting me talk a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing for the last 6-7 months or so that I've found to be very personally gratifying. And as Stacia mentioned, and I'm glad we didn't coordinate, Stacia, because my talk's going to be much shorter as a result of everything you covered, so that's good.
Do you have pictures?
I've had to learn many things as a part of this work. The biggest of which is that there is life outside of Boston and interesting things outside of Boston, and that there are 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts, which I did not know because I only counted the neighborhoods of Boston before as the largest number of areas that I was concerned about. So the learning curve has been a steep one, but as I said, the work and the kinds of things that have come my way have been very gratifying and very interesting. And just to go through a little bit of data that I put together about my kind of 6 months of really doing this. So as you know, my territory is from somewhere around Worcester out to Cape Cod and Nantucket, so there's a lot of variety within that. And since I came on board in June of 2015, I fielded requests for help or information from 28 towns or cities, representing about 40 historic resources or groups of resources dating from 1626 to 1926. So that's quite a variety of types of things to come your way in a relatively short period of time. And as with Stacia, you're contacted by a lot of different kinds of people, from private citizens to leaders of historical societies and other local advocacy groups, town and city officials and planning staff, chairs and members of local historic preservation commissions and community preservation commissions, nonprofit organizations, and colleagues at other preservation organizations around the state, such as MHC, Boston Preservation Alliance, the Community Preservation Coalition, and many others. So you're interacting constantly, not only with people in the field, but also all these new people, many of whom are new to preservation, and you have to try to manage their introduction into the world that we live in without scaring them away or overwhelming them with arcane terms and acronyms and verbiage that's difficult for them to understand. I think it became apparent pretty quickly that there are a lot of common themes and issues that a lot of communities are dealing with, and Stacia touched on some of these as well, but some of the things that I've noted surfacing, or the types of things that I respond to, are really very basic calls from citizen activists, who are new to preservation, who are trying to figure out this land and manage their way through the alphabet soup of organizations, MHC versus PM versus CPC versus VOC versus BPA and HPI and all the rest of them. I remember when I was at Historic Boston for a number of years, we, like other organizations, published a document we called Alphabet Soup because it really is, and we rely on all these acronyms every day, and we forget that we slip into this kind of language sometimes when we're dealing with folks who really don't have any idea what we're talking about. Also, the difference between basic terms that we work with, preservation versus rehabilitation versus restoration versus reconstruction. Tearing down a building, building something that sort of looked like it, but of a different size and out of different materials in a different location is not restoration. Yet some people think that it is. So the education around those kind of basic principles of what historic preservation is a constant thing that we work with. As well, the difference between what a National Historic Landmark is versus National Register versus State Register versus a local historic district, all of which is not necessarily intuitive and needs basic explaining to people 1, 2, 3, or even 10 times in some situations. As Stacia also noted, we get a lot of requests for help and referrals to other people who know a lot more than we do about these issues. And I think Preservation Mass does an excellent job of pulling together directories and resources that we can simply email pick out a few names to recommend and just put information out quickly and effectively. And constantly we are kind of putting out those resources so that people can be empowered to find people who can really help them and to take them through all the details that a project might entail. Requests for help finding funding sources is always up there, and it's always disappointing to have to say to people, well, the list is short, and you know, that's, I think that there's never enough money to do most of what people want to do or would like to do, and it's a constant issue that people come up against, especially in the smaller towns and areas that are a little more economically challenged than we are here in Boston. Helping to deal with imminent teardowns of historic buildings in this hot real estate market is an issue that's been coming up a lot, especially of individual houses. Or in the proactive side of that, particularly town government employees asking for help to position dilapidated or vacant historic house to be redeveloped in a more sensitive way. And there's some really interesting ideas coming out in towns and cities that I've seen in Eastern Mass now. In Methuen, for example, they've developed a city ordinance where if you preserve the existing building on a lot, you can build a subsidiary building with an additional dwelling unit someplace on that lot, sort of tucked away, so long as you preserve the original structure, which was a very sort of creative way to use zoning to encourage the preservation of historic houses. We were recently up in Manchester, New Hampshire, dodging all the political, we did not see Donald Trump, but when we were doing our presentations about what's been going on in our states, we were brought up the tear down issue and talked about the hot real estate market and development and things that were going on in Boston. And there were folks from Connecticut, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, New York? Pennsylvania, yeah, Pennsylvania snuck in, this is mostly in England. And we were the only people in the room that people said development pressures. It was like we had two heads. It was just very interesting to get a sense of what's going on in Maine and what's going on in New Hampshire. And the things that we see as challenges are quite different in our urban environment, our wider economic environment here in Massachusetts than are in other states in the region. Lots of questions about easements and preservation restrictions of various kinds, and that's a hot topic. People don't understand them. The process can be lengthy to get them. With CPA-funded projects out there, there are a lot more of them around, and particularly for folks newer to preservation, it's been a challenge. You can see there's a challenge in them understanding these sorts of things. Speaking of Community Preservation Act, I would say a very high percentage of the requests that I get involve the use of CPA funds, and typically it's from a town government official or a Historic Preservation Commission board or Community Preservation Commission board member or a concerned citizen who has concerns about the way that funds are being used. And you realize that in that world, when has such a large amount of money come into local control for historic preservation? And you see people struggling with effective ways to spend this money wisely. And it's a very interesting process to help communities work through these issues. And it's also very interesting to see how much has been done with all that preservation money around the Commonwealth. And even though we hear a lot of the problematic cases, when you look around to see how effectively these funds have been spent and how that is a primary driver of good preservation in places around the Commonwealth now, we should all be thankful that that resource is there. So Stacia and I often talk about the fact that a lot of what we do is a kind of therapy, where people are coming to you in a state of crisis, and Greg, you know this from the Alliance work, and anybody who works in advocacy knows this, that they're either coming to you a couple of days too late, or 40 years too late, or which can be very challenging because often it's too late really to intervene. But I think what we've tried to do is to position people who come to us like that so that the next time they're in a similar situation, they can be more proactive and less reactive about it. And so if you teach people a process to go through or a way to try to solve these problems early on, then you're educating them and you're hopefully making the number of those emergency calls that seem to come at the most inopportune times, you're managing the number of those. So back to the data that I was talking about at the beginning of what I was saying. It's one of my personal goals to have some sort of contact with every one of the 190 or so, I might be cheating, I might be stealing some places from Stacia, cities and towns in my territory. And I suspect between the work that the two of us have done and our the predecessors as circuit riders, we're probably on the verge of having touched all 351 towns and cities in the Commonwealth at this point. And I've learned, particularly since my kind of preservation came out of community activism, and I was in the position of a lot of these people having to learn these terms and learn these organizations, and so I can empathize a little bit with the things that people are going through. I see on the ground every day that I'm doing this work how important it is throughout the Commonwealth, and I think it's very laudable that Preservation Massachusetts provides this service to a whole state, and I'm pleased and honored to be a part of this work. So thank you very much.